The Miami High Wire Act works on the West Coast. It certainly works on South Beach, but Brent Key says not in the ATL. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you stopping by for the best in discussion, debate, and analysis. Final score from the ATL, Georgia Tech 28, Miami 23, as the Canes go down to defeat for the first time in 2024 at 9-1. Let's get to the action and the ramifications for the ACC race and beyond. Jamal Haynes, 1,000-yard rusher in 2023 for the Jackets. Boom! 65 yards, 16 yards for the score. Quickly, Georgia Tech 7-0. Unfortunately for Haynes and the Yellow Jackets, 3 carries for 83 yards, so only one more carry after the touchdown for Jamal Haynes, and Georgia Tech's star running back had to sit out the rest of the game. Cam Ward, he was in the entire game as the star and Heisman hopeful for Miami. It only took him one play to get on the board for the Canes. 74 yards to Elijah Arroyo. Nobody chose to pick him up. He ran an easy slant, boom, right on him. And the replay showed that as soon as Arroyo just started to turn his head to look toward Ward, boom, the ball was on his hip. He couldn't help but catch it, and we had a 7-7 ball game. Haynes King, Georgia Tech's starting quarterback the past 2 seasons, 27 touchdowns through the air in 2023, did not start because of injury the last 2 games, and by no coincidence, the Yellow Jackets lost those games to Georgia Tech and Notre Dame. Haynes King started that first touchdown drive, didn't have to throw a pass or run it himself. However, he was out. The second drive, it appeared as though he was injured at that point still, or re-injured. Aaron Philo, the true freshman, came in for Georgia Tech, but that would turn out to be the strategy going forward for the Yellow Jackets. They would go back and forth between the runner, King, and the passer, Philo. So Aaron Philo comes into the game. He had some needed experience earlier in the season against Virginia, 184 yards and a pick in that game. Darrell Porter Jr., the Miami cornerback, with an excellent pass breakup on a 3-and-out for Georgia Tech. And then Xavier Restrepo set the all-time receiving record at Miami. So last week against Duke, Restrepo set the yardage mark career for the Canes, and now the university's all-time receptions lead. We mentioned Porter with a nice play in the first quarter. He left the game later in the third quarter. All right, at this point, we got a 7-7 ball game. Georgia Tech hit on 4 of its first 4 third down conversions with, again, a Philo and King sharing time back and forth, not just drives, but from play to play, they were alternating. Malik Rutherford with a screen pass touchdown to make it 14-10, and this is exactly what Georgia Tech and Brent Key wanted. 17 play drive, 75 yards. They took 10:45 off the clock. That was Georgia Tech's longest drive of 2024. And, of course, they're trying to keep the most prolific offense in college football on the sideline. And they were successful for much of the day. Amari Harvey's an excellent safety for Georgia Tech, one of the best in the ACC. Also should have had a pass interference called on him against Isaiah Horton. That was a key play in the first half, although the very next play, there was a hands to the face that should have been called against Miami that kept their drive going at that point. Cam Ward missed Xavier Restrepo, did not see him downfield. He ran around and was stopped on a 4th and 3 as Miami went for it and bypassed the field goal try by one of the better kickers in the nation, Andre Borgalis. But they went for it, stopped at the Georgia Tech 23. But Georgia Tech did not take advantage. Philo missed Rutherford on a 3rd and 12 in which he was open for the completion conversion. 1:47 left in the half, and we go to the break with the Yellow Jackets leading 14-10. Yellow Jackets get another stop on downs as Miami went for it, and then they turn that into a run drive, 8 plays, 61 yards, and they chew up another 4.5 minutes to take a 21-10 lead. But Cam Ward right back, hits Isaiah Horton on a beautifully thrown ball right over the defensive back in the left corner of the end zone, basically skimmed his helmet and threw it to Horton in the end zone for the touchdown. But the sack on the 2-point play meant Miami still trailed 21-16. At that point, Cam Ward, 25 of 39, 3 touchdown passes, 348 yards through the air. Georgia Tech had running backs falling like flies in this one. Their number 2 guy, Chad Alexander, he went down during the course of this game after 6 carries and 26 yards. Trey Cooley, the 4th string running back, turned out to be the guy that they had to go to most of the time when it wasn't Haynes King running, but most of the time it was Haynes King with the running threat for Georgia Tech, 93 yards rushing for Haynes King. And also Philo, despite being the passing quarterback, had a number of key runs as Miami was not able to stop 2 things in this game for the Georgia Tech offense. It was simply the quarterback run play on the read option that Haynes King seems to be a master at determining whether to give it to the backer. Most of the time, he kept it for positive yardage. So despite some sacks, Haynes King, again, with almost 100 yards rushing, as Miami gave up the most rushing yards against this defense since going back to that 2020 game. If you remember, it was Sam Howell, quarterback, and the 2 future NFL running backs for North Carolina, who ran for, this almost seems incredible. It is incredible. 554 yards in that game, in which North Carolina won at Hard Rock. 271 today. So that was the most since 2020 at 554, and that's not even half as much. That's what a devastating day that was. The Georgia Tech offensive line, we rated it, along with other people across college football, as an underrated line, one of the 5 to 10 best in college football, and it proved to be exactly that in this game. We're still in the 3rd quarter. Philo rips a throw for 27, and then again, it's Haynes King with the read option time and time again. On the touchdown play, he fooled and duped Chase Smith to chase the running back, and it's a 28-16 Georgia Tech lead. Miami chunk plays right down the field. Of course, they've still got plenty of time, down 2 scores with this offense. They get right to the red zone immediately, but Georgia Tech gets a couple key penalties, gets a few pass breakups, tackle behind the line of scrimmage, and suddenly it's 4th and 16. Miami bypasses the field goal because that would have only gotten them within 9 at 28-16 at this point. However, that calls into question, why are you going for 2 early in the game when it's 21-10 early 3rd quarter? Kick the extra point. They get the sack on Ward after he had thrown a touchdown pass that got called back because of holding. That threw Miami into a 4th and 16 situation. Georgia Tech gets the sack, and Miami's denied once again. Georgia Tech 3 and out, though, to give Miami the football right back, and the Yellow Jackets should have converted. Philo missed Eric Singleton, who was wide open right in front of him. Got to give some credit, though, to Ruben Bain, who possibly caused the errant throw because he got his hands up in Philo's face. At this point, we got 8 minutes left in the game, and it is 28-16, and Kyle Eifert had a sack on Cam Ward. Mark Fletcher had a drop, but again, the Miami downfield passing game is one of the best in college football. Ward to Jacoby George on a 4th down conversion keeps it going. More chunk plays, and this time it was Xavier Restrepo on the double move on the outside, and the offensive line held up to give Cam Ward plenty of time on this one to rip the throw with 6 minutes left on a 50-yarder down the field. 28-23 as the Canes get within 5. Key situation here, and a decision that Mario Cristobal may regret, although you really can't fault him to a certain extent. So there were 2 situations here that could be called into question. One was that Georgia Tech had a 4th and 3 in which Mario Cristobal must have seen something that caused him to call a timeout, his first timeout. Georgia Tech had run its final play before the 2-minute timeout, and there was still 2:12 in that range. So Miami could have called the timeout, forced Georgia Tech to punt, gotten the ball back before the 2-minute timeout, actually run a play, and then taken the 2-minute timeout, but they allowed Georgia Tech just to run the clock all the way down to the 2-minute warning. Okay, sorry, 2-minute timeout. Can't call it a warning. All right, so Miami gets it back and couldn't move the ball. They had it 28-23 with about just under 2 minutes left to play, but Romello Height made the strip sack on Cam Ward. And if there are 2 things that Cam Ward does with all the immense talent and ability and gamesmanship and everything that he's got going for him. NFL arm, he might be the best quarterback in college football. The positives are 10-1 over the negatives, but too many pirouettes, ping pong, back and forth, pinball running around, bouncing off guys, spinning around in the pocket. When they play better defenses, if they reach the college football playoffs, because they probably won't play better defenses, even getting to the ACC championship game, some of those players might be a little bit tougher, meaner, more skilled to get a strip sack. Well, we saw it right here that wrapped up the ball game for Georgia Tech. Strip sack from behind after Cam Ward extended a play. You don't want to call into question and you don't want to put the wraps on his playmaking ability, but those sorts of plays, and then also, we didn't see it today. We did not see it today, did not throw any picks, didn't come close to throw any picks that I took note of, but he usually throws the ball back across his body and across the field late in the play, and that burns him at times, as we saw against Duke last week. Again, the Romello Height strip sack, if you remember just a few years ago, Romello Height was one of the prized defensive recruits in the nation, almost went to Miami, ended up going to USC. Now he's at Georgia Tech, of course. Vandenberg with the fumble recovery with $1:36 left. Georgia Tech ran the jet sweep to finish it off and get that one first down to clinch it. And again, final score from Atlanta is 28-23 Georgia Tech over Miami. Okay, for the Yellow Jackets, they move on to 6-4. Bowl eligibility for them at 4-3 in the ACC. Their first win against a top 5 opponent in their last 14 games. Okay, more importantly for the ACC and the college football playoff is the situation with Miami. 9-1, 5-1 in the ACC. All right, they got a game against Wake Forest at home next week. Then they close out with Syracuse. All right, Clemson only has one loss. Pitt only has one loss in the ACC. Therefore, we've got a 3-way tie right now with SMU in first place with no losses. Too much for us to break down right here. Clemson and Pitt do play in a couple weeks. Actually, next week, I believe, in Pitt. Neither one of those teams plays Miami. So the winner of the Clemson-Pitt game, if they do not falter otherwise, and if Miami, assuming they win their 2 games, we're going to have a 2-way tie for second place in the ACC, unless SMU falters. We've got a lot of situations to break down. But again, the most direct situation to break down is, of course, the Miami comparison against Clemson and against Pitt. We'll do that this week. Comments and questions down below. And again, we'll break down the ACC race later this week, right here at the Voice of College Football.